the government began publishing 80,000 pages of unredacted records relating to their investigation at the direction of President Donald Trump.
The release of these documents do anything to resolve the conspiracy theories that have proliferated for decades.
More than 60 years later, the assassination of John F. Kennedy remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. The official story? Full of holes. The questions? Endless. Who was Lee Harvey Oswald, really?
Kennedy assassination, even the FBI was guilty of it because Oswald himself had dropped off a note at the FBI Dallas headquarters.
A lone gunman or a pawn in a much larger game? His secretive trip to Mexico City just weeks before the shooting raises more questions than answers. Was he working alone, or was there a deeper conspiracy at play? The truth might be even stranger than we ever imagined. Let's uncover the secrets hidden in plain sight. Oswald in Mexico City. Lee Harvey. Oswald's trip to Mexico City in September 1963 is one of the strangest pieces of the JFK assassination puzzle. He had a mission, securing a visa to enter Cuba. He visited the Cuban embassy, met officials, and made his request. But what really happened during his time there? The Trump administration recently released over 2,000 documents related to Kennedy's assassination, but instead of answering questions, the files only deepened the mystery. For decades, theories have swirled about what Oswald was doing in Mexico City just weeks before he pulled the trigger in Dallas. The timing is suspicious. The location is even more so. Back then, Mexico City was crawling with spies. Cuban agents, Soviet operatives, and CIA informants roamed the streets. It was a known battleground for Cold War intelligence. Oswald was right in the middle of it all. Coincidence? Or was something else going on? Oswald attempted to secure a Soviet visa, but the records are full of gaps. The day he visited the Soviet embassy, the CIA's surveillance camera suddenly stopped working. No photos exist. A taped phone call once captured a man claiming to be Oswald speaking with Soviet officials, but FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover insisted the voice wasn't his. That recording? It vanished. Evidence that could have placed Oswald in key locations before the assassination was either lost, destroyed, or dismissed. Then there's the most bizarre part. Oswald wasn't alone. CIA informants saw him at a party in Mexico City with two young Americans. Who were they? No one knows. They were never identified. They spent days with a man who would go on to assassinate a US president, then disappeared without a trace. Every new revelation only raises more questions. Was Oswald working alone, or was he being watched, manipulated, or even helped? Was his Mexico City trip a failed attempt at escape or part of something bigger? Missing files, broken surveillance, and people vanishing into thin air. It all sounds like the plot of a spy thriller, but this was real, and the truth is still buried under layers of secrecy. The June Cobb mystery. June Cobb wasn't just any journalist. She had connections that made her a figure of intrigue, a one-time CIA asset, a former revolutionary, and a woman with ties to Lee Harvey Oswald. Her story is buried in secrecy, her files locked away for security reasons, and yet her name keeps surfacing in the shadows of the JFK assassination. Oswald's movements in Mexico City before the assassination remain one of the most puzzling aspects of the case. And Cobb? She was right in the middle of it. She was the first to report that Oswald had attended a party filled with Cuban diplomats and spies. The kind of party where, according to playwright Elena Garro, people casually joked about how useful it would be if Kennedy were killed. The CIA took Cobb's words seriously. She wasn't known for making things up. But despite the chilling nature of her claims, the agency dismissed her report, and no official action was taken. Cobb's life before all this was just as controversial. In the 1950s, she was tangled up in the drug trade alongside her Colombian fiancé and his twin brother. But when the deal went sour, she turned informant, leading to arrests in both Cuba and Colombia. By the time she landed in Mexico, she was working with the CIA, providing intelligence that proved valuable. That's why, when she spoke about Oswald's presence at the Mexico City party, people listened. What exactly was Oswald doing there? Who was he meeting? The official story suggests he tried, unsuccessfully, to secure a visa to Cuba. But Cobb's information pointed to something darker. If there really were discussions about Kennedy's death, was Oswald a pawn, a willing participant, or just an outsider caught in a web of dangerous political schemes? Mexico City was a hotspot of Cold War espionage, filled with double agents, informants, and shifting allegiances. Cobb, once a supporter of Fidel Castro, had turned against the Cuban regime. She had access to intelligence circles that few others did. So when she passed along intel about Oswald, it wasn't just speculation, it was a warning that was ignored. No direct evidence ever tied Cuba or the Soviets to Kennedy's assassination. Even when KGB files were declassified, nothing definitive emerged. But Cobb's report remains a haunting footnote. A CIA-backed informant, a known asset, a woman with a history of exposing criminal networks. One thing is certain, Cobb knew more than she let on. And whatever happened at that Mexico City party, the full truth remains buried in classified files. How a defector slipped through the cracks. Lee Harvey Oswald did not simply emerge from obscurity to assassinate President John F. Kennedy. Long before November 22, 1963, he was on the radar of multiple intelligence agencies. The FBI, CIA, and even the Office of Naval Intelligence had been monitoring him for years, tracking his movements, associations, and ideological leanings. He wasn't just a lone wolf, he was a known entity. So how did someone flagged for potential espionage manage to elude scrutiny and commit one of the most infamous assassinations in history? Oswald's path to Dallas was lined with red flags. His story was not just one of radical ideology. It was one of a man caught between superpowers at the height of the Cold War. On October 16, 1959, he arrived in Moscow and dramatically renounced his American citizenship. At the time, the Soviet government was wary of defectors, suspecting them of being double agents. Initially, Oswald was denied asylum. Desperate, he reportedly attempted to end his life in his hotel room. The act of desperation appeared to shift Soviet attitudes, and he was allowed to remain in the USSR, albeit under heavy KGB surveillance. He was relocated to Minsk, where he was provided with a government-subsidized apartment and a job at a radio and television factory. It was here that Oswald allegedly discussed classified information with the Soviets, including details about America's top-secret U-2 spy planes. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Anthony Summers later suggested that Oswald may have handed over crucial intelligence. However, no definitive proof has ever been found, leaving a troubling gap in the narrative. If Oswald had indeed betrayed American secrets, why was he able to return to the United States with such ease? In June 1962, Oswald made his way back to America, not as a fugitive, not as a detained suspect, but as a free man. Even more astonishing, he brought his Soviet wife, Marina, and their newborn daughter with him. One would expect a defector with possible links to espionage to be detained, interrogated extensively, and placed under constant watch. Instead, Oswald underwent only routine FBI questioning and was then allowed to resume life as if his years in the USSR had never happened. No lengthy CIA debriefing, no charges, just a few casual interviews. The warnings kept coming. On August 10, 1963, Oswald was arrested in New Orleans for disturbing the peace while distributing pro-Castro pamphlets. He even walked into the Soviet and Cuban embassies in Mexico City that September, allegedly seeking passage to Cuba. These actions should have raised alarms. Yet the agencies tasked with national security still took no decisive action. Was this sheer incompetence, bureaucratic oversight, or something more sinister? The official narrative remains that Oswald acted alone. But when a man with a history of defection, potential access to American military secrets, and deep connections to communist entities is allowed to move unimpeded, serious questions remain. Was he being watched? Yes. Was he a pawn in a larger game? Possibly. And could the assassination of President Kennedy have been prevented? That is a question that haunts history to this day. A president under attack. March 30th, 1981. A routine presidential outing turned into chaos in seconds. As President Ronald Reagan exited the Washington Hilton Hotel, gunfire erupted. The shooter, 25-year-old John Hinckley Jr., fired multiple rounds, one of which struck Reagan in the chest. The president didn't collapse. He waved to the crowd, unaware a bullet had pierced his lung. Secret Service agents acted fast, shoving him into the limousine. Blood pooled inside his jacket. The world held its breath. White House Press Secretary James Brady wasn't as lucky. A bullet tore through his skull, leaving him critically wounded. 2 law enforcement officers also took hits. It could have been far worse. At George Washington University Hospital, doctors rushed to save Reagan. A bullet had ricocheted off the limousine and lodged near his heart. The situation was dire. The operating room buzzed with urgency. Reagan, in classic fashion, cracked a joke before surgery. "I hope you're all Republicans." The tension broke for a moment. Then, the fight for his life began. The bullet was removed. The bleeding stopped. The president survived. The nation exhaled. His recovery was swift. His resilience undeniable. Just weeks later, he was back to work. The attempted assassination shook the country. Security tightened. Presidential protection evolved. But comparisons arose. A different era. A different president. John F. Kennedy. November 22, 1963, Dallas, Texas. A motorcade, an open car, a fatal mistake. The first shot hit Kennedy in the throat. 5 seconds passed. The Secret Service did nothing. The second shot was the kill shot. No immediate action. No shield from an agent. No evasive maneuver. Reagan was saved by a split-second response. Kennedy had no such chance. His driver, William Greer, failed to react. Agent Paul Landis, trailing the vehicle, didn't leap in to protect him. The only agent who moved was Clint Hill, assigned to Jackie Kennedy, not the president. Vanity Fair later exposed a disturbing culture within the Secret Service. Agents bragged about their endurance, skipping sleep, avoiding food, drinking heavily. The night before Kennedy's assassination, they had been out late. Hangovers and exhaustion may have dulled their reflexes. The woman who filmed history and disappeared. Among the many mysteries surrounding the assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963, few are as compelling as that of the enigmatic woman known as the Babushka lady. Captured in multiple photographs and film reels, she stood in Dealey Plaza, just yards from where the president was fatally shot. Unlike many others in the crowd who instinctively ducked or fled at the sound of gunfire, she remained composed, her camera raised, seemingly recording history as it unfolded in real time. The woman, often described as heavy-set, dark-haired, and likely in her late 30s or 40s, wore a tan trench coat, dark sunglasses, and a distinctive scarf tied beneath her chin, similar to the traditional headscarves worn by elderly Russian women, or babushkas. This peculiar detail led to her enduring nickname. But more intriguing than her appearance was the question of what she might have captured on film. Positioned at a near-perfect vantage point along Elm Street, her camera was trained on the motorcade as it passed. If she recorded the crucial moments of the assassination, her footage could provide unparalleled clarity about the events of that day, perhaps even revealing new insights into a crime that has sparked endless debate and speculation. Yet, no such film has ever been found. No clear evidence has surfaced proving that her footage was developed, confiscated, or even destroyed. Unlike the famous Zapruder film, which remains the most studied visual record of the assassination, the Babushka lady's potential recording is an enigma. Investigators and conspiracy theorists alike have scrutinized every frame of existing footage, every witness account, and every declassified document in hopes of identifying her or her missing film. But decades later, she remains unidentified, her whereabouts unknown, and her film, if it ever existed, still lost. Over the years, the Babushka lady has been compared to other shadowy figures linked to the assassination, such as the Umbrella Man, the Three Tramps, and the spectral Badge Man, believed by some to be a hidden shooter. While many of these figures have since been identified or debunked, the Babushka lady remains a frustrating exception. Investigators have speculated that she may have feared coming forward due to concerns over government involvement, personal safety, or simply a reluctance to become embroiled in the political maelstrom that followed JFK's death. In 1970, A woman named Beverly Oliver stepped into the spotlight, claiming to be the Babushka lady. A former nightclub singer, Oliver recounted a dramatic story in which she alleged that she filmed the assassination using a sophisticated camera, one that did not actually exist in 1963. Her credibility further eroded when she claimed she had been coerced into handing over the film to government agents, never to see it again. Most researchers dismissed her account, but her claims added yet another layer to the mystery. To this day, no one knows the Babushka lady's true identity or what she may have witnessed. Her missing film remains one of the most tantalizing lost artifacts in American history. If it were ever found, it could offer unprecedented clarity, perhaps even answering lingering questions that continue to divide historians, investigators, and conspiracy theorists. Until then, the Babushka lady remains frozen in time, an anonymous figure standing at the crossroads of history, her camera raised, her secrets locked away forever. JFK's autopsy. The moment John F. Kennedy's body arrived at Parkland Memorial Hospital, chaos erupted. Doctors barely got a look before a fight broke out. Who had the right to perform the autopsy? Texas law stated it was a state crime, making Dallas medical examiner Earl Rose responsible. The Secret Service disagreed. Jackie Kennedy refused to let her husband's body remain in Texas. Voices rose. Tensions flared. At one point, some say guns were drawn. In the end, JFK's body was taken, against Texas law, to Bethesda Naval Hospital in Maryland. But what happened next raised even bigger questions. The autopsy itself remains one of the most controversial in history. Two Navy pathologists, Commander James Humes and Commander J. Thornton Boswell, conducted the examination. They had no prior experience with gunshot wounds. To compensate, ballistics expert Pierre Fink from the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology was called in. But even with a team, strange inconsistencies surfaced. The president's personal physician, Rear Admiral George Berkeley, wanted a quick autopsy, just enough to find the bullets. Admiral Calvin Galloway intervened, demanding a full examination. But was it enough? Then came the most puzzling part, the handling of Kennedy's brain. Medical records state that his brain was removed and set aside for further study. Later, it vanished. No one knows how, when, or why. Without it, key details about the trajectory of the bullets and the true nature of his wounds were lost forever. Some believe this was intentional. If the brain revealed an entry wound from the front, it would suggest a second shooter, evidence of a conspiracy. The choice of Bethesda Naval Hospital was no accident. Jackie Kennedy insisted on it because her husband had served in the Navy. But others suspect a different reason. A military-controlled hospital meant tighter security, fewer questions, and total control over what was recorded. By the time the official autopsy report was released, conflicting details fueled suspicions. Witnesses who saw the body at Parkland Hospital recalled a different wound pattern than what appeared in the final autopsy photos. Reports described multiple versions of Kennedy's skull damage. Was there a cover-up? The aftermath only deepened the mystery. Photographs, X-rays, and notes disappeared or were altered. Autopsy personnel gave contradictory statements. Some later admitted pressure from higher-ups to stick to an official narrative. When journalist David Lifton investigated, he suggested an even darker possibility, that Kennedy's body had been altered before reaching Bethesda. JFK's assassination and the hitman's confession. Could Cuba have played a role in the assassination of John F. Kennedy? Some believe so. The theory suggests Lee Harvey Oswald had ties to the Cuban government or its intelligence agencies. His 1963 trip to Mexico City, where he allegedly met Cuban officials, is often pointed to as a key piece of the puzzle. But is there any truth to it? Official investigations, including the Warren Commission and the House Select Committee on Assassinations, say no. Yet, strange accounts continue to surface. A deathbed confession, a Cuban hitman, a claim that changes everything. In 1966, Herminio Diaz Garcia, a known assassin for the Cuban Mafia, was fatally wounded during a prison raid. Before he died, he told fellow mobster Tony Qua that he was responsible for killing the U.S. president. Journalist Anthony Summers included this claim in his book, Not in Your Lifetime, adding another layer of mystery to the Kennedy case. Was Diaz telling the truth, or was this just another fabrication in a web of conspiracies? More pieces of the puzzle emerged in 2007. Summers, along with Robert Blakey, a former chief counsel to the House Select Committee on Assassinations, interviewed Cuban exile Ronaldo Martinez Gomez. Gomez had spent time in prison with Qua and heard the confession firsthand. In 2013, he spoke with The Telegraph, reaffirming that Diaz had taken credit for JFK's death. If true, it meant Oswald wasn't the lone gunman. More importantly, it suggested a Cuban connection that had long been dismissed. Diaz's history raised even more questions. He had been in the U.S. on November 23, 1963, the day after Kennedy was shot. Before that, he had reportedly carried out 20 political assassinations. Could he have been involved? Hitmen aren't exactly known for their honesty, but his confession wasn't the only link between Cuba and the Kennedy murder. Another unsettling account came from Abraham Bolden, a former Secret Service agent assigned to Kennedy's detail. In 2007, he told ABC News about a tip-off received before JFK's canceled trip to Chicago on November 2, 1963. According to Bolden, 2 Cuban men had rented a room overlooking the motorcade route, and they had rifles. The surveillance operation on them failed, and the men disappeared without a trace. Had a similar setup been planned in Dallas? These eerie connections keep the Cuba theory alive. The Kennedy-Giancana connection. A U.S. president and a ruthless mob boss. 2 men from vastly different worlds, yet their names keep colliding in the same stories. The Kennedy-Giancana connection remains one of the most debated links between politics and organized crime. Did the Mafia help John F. Kennedy win the 1960 elections? Did they later turn on him? Sam Giancana wasn't just any mobster. He was one of Chicago's most feared crime lords, once working under Al Capone. His influence stretched far beyond the underworld, and yet, whispers of his ties to the Kennedy family refused to fade. Joseph P. Kennedy, JFK's father, had his own history with organized crime, dating back to the Prohibition era. He and Giancana allegedly did business together: illegal liquor, power deals, quiet favors. When JFK ran for president, did his father call in an old favor? Investigative journalist Seymour Hersh suggested in his 1997 book, The Dark Side of Camelot, that Joe Kennedy personally sought Giancana's help to swing the 1960 elections in his son's favor. The Mafia allegedly pressured labor unions to push votes toward Kennedy. The connection didn't end there. Frank Sinatra, a close friend of both JFK and Giancana, supposedly played middleman. Sinatra's daughter, Tina, later claimed her father urged the mob to support Kennedy's campaign. But what about the most damning link? Giancana and JFK reportedly shared a mistress, Judith Campbell Exner. She claimed in 1988 that she arranged secret meetings between the two. Her involvement suggests that Giancana had direct access to the president. If true, what kind of deals were made behind closed doors? Then, the story took a darker turn. The Mafia, once rumored to have helped Kennedy, may have been involved in his downfall. Some believe JFK's crackdown on organized crime after taking office was seen as a betrayal. The same men who allegedly helped him rise may have sought revenge. And Giancana? He met a bloody end before he could testify about his dealings with the CIA. Shot 7 times at his home in 1975, he took many secrets to the grave. Lee Harvey Oswald, the alleged assassin, adds another layer of mystery. His police interrogation was never properly recorded. No stenographers, no tape recorders, just scattered, handwritten notes. The only surviving set surfaced in the 1990s, found among the belongings of a retired Dallas police captain. Oswald denied killing the president. He even insisted that photos of him holding the murder weapon were fake. If he wasn't seeking notoriety, then why did he do it? Or did someone else pull the strings? The Kennedy assassination remains one of the greatest unsolved puzzles in American history. JFK Files Unsealed. The U.S. government has just made public the final collection of documents concerning the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Secrecy has cloaked this case for decades. The intrigue continues, and conspiracy theories persist even after more than 60 years. This new release brings with it a promise of answers, yet many questions remain unanswered. 80,000 pages of files are now accessible, following a direct order from President Donald Trump, who insisted on full disclosure. The bold act demanded that any remaining unredacted files be unveiled to the public without further delay. The newly released documents arrive with an air of suspense that captures the imagination of history, enthusiasts, and conspiracy theorists alike. Experts now have the opportunity to scrutinize these pages in search of clues that might either confirm or challenge the established narrative. Every detail matters. The investigation is expected to be painstaking. Analysts and researchers are already busy combing through the materials. They note that not all the files are available online at the moment. Even with this vast trove of information, many believe that revolutionary discoveries are unlikely. Instead, subtle hints and minute details may provide incremental insights into a case that has perplexed America for generations. This development does little to silence those who question the official account. Many Americans still harbor suspicions that the lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, did not act by himself. A cloud of doubt continues to surround his actions. Skeptics wonder if a larger conspiracy was at work, involving forces that have never been fully exposed. The tension between what has been disclosed and what remains hidden only intensifies public curiosity. The archives that had already been released over the years contained thousands of pages, yet a portion of these documents had been withheld, often citing concerns over national security. The decision to finally release the remainder is both bold and controversial. The story of JFK's assassination is far from settled. The documents, while extensive, may serve more as a historical record than as a key to unlocking long-suppressed secrets. The enduring mystery of that fateful day continues to captivate audiences. Readers are left to ponder whether these files will illuminate the truth or simply add more layers to an already complex puzzle. The allure of unsolved mysteries is powerful. Every page turned holds the potential for revelation. Every unanswered question fuels the ongoing debate about one of the most infamous events in American history. We hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more mind-boggling stories.